The judge that blocked the Trump buyout program temporarily has now rescinded the block and said that the plan to buy out federal employees can go forward. As of right now, some 75,000 federal employees have agreed to take the buyout. The American Federation of Government Employees, one of the union plaintiffs, is outraged over the ruling. By the way, do you know that FDR was opposed to government unions? Thought it was outrageous that people that work for taxpayers could put a gun to the taxpayer's head and say, I'm not going to work unless you pay me more money. But the union is very upset about the Trump buyout. As mentioned, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been confirmed as the Secretary of HHS. Pam Bondi has been confirmed as head of DNR. And that makes it 14 for 14, doesn't it? The only one that didn't get through was Matt Gaetz, and he withdrew his own name. Speaking of AG Pam Bondi, she's announced charges against top New York officials for protecting illegal aliens. She says anybody that's given it a green light will be sued. She's filed charges against the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, against Letitia James, and Mark Schroeder, who's with the DMV. Bondi said, quote, "This is a new DOJ, and we are taking steps to protect Americans. New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today." End of quote. Can you say the new sheriff in town? And all this about judges stopping the president from putting a pause on spending. I don't believe that ultimately what Donald Trump has done will be determined to be illegal. It was a temporary pause, for one thing. Are you really saying that the president has no power whatsoever to stop wasteful spending that does not advance the purpose for which the money was allocated? This is interesting. MSNBC has a legal analyst named Danny Savalos, who often is fairly reasonable. He pushed back against people like Senator Chris Murphy, a big Trump hater. Murphy says this, number 35.
So I just think there's a tipping point at which you can't get your democracy back. And I see all of these very purposeful lines of effort that the Trump administration and Elon Musk are taking. And I think we just have to be right now, at this moment, on red alert mode.
We're all going to die. It's DEFCON 1. Donald Trump is undermining the foundations of our republic. We didn't care when Joe Biden ignored the Supreme Court and issued another debt forgiveness plan. We didn't care when Barack Obama said he could not unilaterally grant protected status to illegal aliens and then proceeded to do it. But this is outrageous. We got to stop it. It's a constitutional crisis. Here's MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos, number 3.
I think we need to be careful with the term constitutional crisis, because as I define it, that would be a situation where the Constitution doesn't have an answer and there is a pressing conflict. The flurry of executive orders, the chaos, that I think doesn't get us to crisis yet. It is irritating for the courts. It is challenging. It could lead to a serious problem if, as you said, they become too congested with dealing with these orders.
They keep coming. Yeah.
The crisis occurs, and we've already talked about it, at the moment when there is a court order and the president or the administration refuses to follow it. Because historically, we don't really have a clear answer for what to do in that situation. On the first half of it, issuing a bunch of executive orders, not only do we know that the courts can handle it, they already did this back in 2017. This is the same MO. The Trump administration then would just fire out executive orders. It felt like they weren't even spell checking them, and then they would let the courts prune them like the proverbial bonsai tree, or they would just withdraw them and go back to the drawing board. It's probably not the most efficient way of doing it. It's chaotic, as you said. It's problematic. But constitutional crisis for me is the moment the court issues an order and the administration resists. You could say that the last notable occurrence was when Nixon initially refused to comply with a subpoena issued by the Supreme Court. Eventually, he capitulated. But history is full of these near crises examples. The question is, what do we do going forward?
Is there any evidence that Donald Trump is going to ignore what the courts tell him? The left always talks about how Donald Trump filed all these lawsuits to, quote, overturn the election of 2020. Did he defy them? Did he stay in the White House? We played you yesterday, AOC, saying, you know, because the Supreme Court has gotten so illegitimate, you can ignore them. We played you Biden saying on 3 separate occasions, yeah, the Supreme Court told me I couldn't do the student debt relief, but I figured out a way of doing it anyway. Did Senator Chris Murphy light his hair on fire? Here's what the press secretary said about this constitutional crisis nonsense. Number 1.
I would like to address an extremely dishonest narrative that we've seen emerging over the past few days. Many outlets in this room have been fear-mongering the American people into believing there is a constitutional crisis taking place here at the White House. I've been hearing those words a lot lately. But in fact, the real constitutional crisis is taking place within our judicial branch, where district court judges in liberal districts across the country are abusing their power to unilaterally block President Trump's basic executive authority. We believe these judges are acting as judicial activists rather than honest arbiters of the law. And they have issued at least 12 injunctions against this administration in the past 14 days, often without citing any evidence or grounds for their lawsuits. This is part of a larger concerted effort by Democrat activists and nothing more than the continuation of the weaponization of justice against President Trump. Quick news flash to these liberal judges who are supporting their obstructionist efforts. 77 million Americans voted to elect this president. And each injunction is an abuse of the rule of law and an attempt to thwart the will of the people. As the president clearly stated in the Oval Office yesterday, we will comply with the law in the courts, but we will also continue to seek every legal remedy to ultimately overturn these radical injunctions and ensure President Trump's policies can be enacted.
So Trump intends to comply with the court rulings, lower court rulings, while continuing to appeal in hopes that they'll be overturned. I want to remind you, we come back, what AOC said about Supreme Court rulings that she doesn't like. And you tell me which party is the party that is pushing a constitutional crisis, which party that is urging insurrection. Hakeem Jeffries said we're going to fight Donald Trump in the streets. We played you a pastor who said sometimes violence is necessary. Whatever happened to civil disobedience? Thanks for watching these clips from The Larry Elder Show. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment. More thought-provoking discussions are just a click away, so stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next one.